Hello everybody and welcome to the 8th edition in the series by the HR Tech Partnership. My name's Sharon Sagoo and we're pleased to have you join us this lunchtime. For those of you who are new and haven't joined us before, this is really a series where we discuss how AI and digital solutions can improve a variety of people management strategies. And today's timely topic is diversity and inclusion. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined with our panel today. We have three panelists this morning. First of all, we have Mel Newton. Mel is the People Consulting Partner at KPMG UK. We also have Leilani Sierra. Leilani is the Head of People Solutions globally for Chanel. And of course, we have Devyani Vaishampayam, who's the Managing Director of the HR Tech Partnership and has held a serious number of HR roles across a number of FTSE 100 companies. So welcome to Mel, Leilani and Devyani. Just to mention, there is the opportunity to ask questions below, so please do use the chat function. We'd love to have you to be as interactive with us as possible. And to start today, I'd love to hand over to Devyani to really set the scene for us. Thanks, Devyani.
Thanks, Sharon. So I think there's no doubt that the current crisis is having an impact on the diversity agenda. In May, McKinsey did a research piece with global D&I leaders, and it was slightly concerning that 27% of them had either completely put a hold on or drastically reduced their D&I initiatives. And that was understandable, but I think the next couple of years is still going to put a lot of pressure on costs on organizations. And there is a danger that the focus on this topic may reduce. And of course, in a remote environment, there is the possibility of stereotypes going up, but also I think difficulty in maintaining community engagement. But on the plus side, I think there are also quite a few opportunities. Firstly, I think the talent pool today can now be much wider because people no longer physically need to be in the office. So there is the opportunity of having a geographically diverse workforce. Remote working has made it possible for working parents to have a better work-life balance. And therefore, from an engagement perspective, that could be hugely helpful. The most important thing, I think, is the current crisis has shown that the leaders who were successful have had quite a different style. They've had to be much more empathetic. They had to be strong in communication and in a way that naturally aligns itself with women who therefore could have more opportunities for leadership roles. So I do think that the picture is not all grim. And of course, the Black Lives Matter movement and in general, D&I has gone up higher on the strategic agenda for business leaders. Now, where does AI and digital come into all this? What I see is business leaders now actively want to make sure that they are pushing the dial and therefore they are able to actually make progress on the D&I agenda. And AI and digital solutions can definitely help. Not just because they cost a fraction of what normal technology does, but more importantly, I think they are able to personalize content. And more importantly, it uses real-time data. And so for business leaders who are operating in a very uncertain environment, it can give you insights, not just real-time, but also on a predictive basis. So hopefully, I think the next half an hour should give you a better understanding of what exists out there, but more importantly, we have very experienced practitioners who can share what they see as happening both in their own organization as well as with their clients.
Thanks, Devyani. Some really thoughtful points for us to consider and a great way to really open the conversation today. So I'll go straight to our panel and speak to Leilani first of all. Leilani, what is it that you're seeing currently in the way of AI and digital solutions around diversity and inclusion at the moment?
So this is a very critical topic for a lot of organizations. And what we're finding is one of the areas that AI could assist is actually with trying to determine if there's bias that's occurring in the organization. And this is a key topic as it relates to D&I. And there are AI solutions that can really support this. And the best part is that these type of solutions are layered over the transactional or record-keeping systems that already are in the organization. So you have impact analysis algorithms that can really look at the transactions that are occurring traditionally in organizations such as performance appraisals, talent and succession planning, or even reward-related decisions, such as your salary increase process that may happen annually, your discretionary bonuses that are also done systemically and approved systemically, long-term incentives or options and awards. All of these are typically recorded in your systems of record, and these AI algorithms can really parse through that information and see if there are patterns that are leading to potential bias or stereotype that really organizations should investigate further and try to address. The AI is there just layered on top to provide information that otherwise would be very, very hard to collate and to find by humans, and gives that information in a presentable way so that the organization can do discovery.
Great, thanks Leilani. It's really interesting to hear about the different algorithms and how they can reduce these inequalities. And I'll pass over to Mel now. Mel, you have a lot of exposure at KPMG to a lot of clients. So what is it that you're seeing your clients doing in terms of AI around diversity and inclusion?
Interesting, following on from both Devyani and Leilani, as well as the very deep AI capability for algorithms and data analysis, we're also seeing during this period of post-COVID pandemic, or during the pandemic, and people working at home and so on, we're seeing a lot of use of digital tools. So for example, virtual working through Zoom, as we are today, these sorts of tools, we're seeing quite a significant impact on D&I as a result of these simple digital tools, whereby there is less pre-meeting banter. We're seeing different layers in the organization, senior, junior, working much more effectively together, and losing some of those hierarchies that we see in the organization. So there's an immediate, very simple impact of digitalization, if you like, on how we work. And we're also seeing that with customer interactions, customer experience, whereby a lot of our interactions with customers have now become digital. So if you're buying insurance, for example, the likelihood is you're now going to be buying that through digital tools. And that, again, is a big plus point in terms of addressing D&I. There's less interaction with FaceTime individuals, and much more objective around what is the product, what is the tool that the service that's being bought or sold, and much less interaction there from a D&I bias point of view. So on a less high technical plane, but nevertheless having significant impact currently.
Fantastic, thank you, Mel. Some really interesting points. And from what yourself and what Leilani is saying, there is obviously quite a level of digital solutions that are actually available and companies are actually considering. But I guess if we turn to think about adoption, we've heard a lot about AI being in its infancy stage over the last couple of years, and now it's really ramping up. So in terms of adoption in the next 12 to 18 months, I'll turn to Leilani first. Leilani, what do you see yourself doing differently around D&I?
So I think what most organizations are finding, and certainly this is the case on our side, is the use of AI is inevitable in all facets of the organization, and probably will happen a lot quicker than we'd like. So it's really important to build the right data governance and make sure that that's very clear and transparent. So that's all about how data is secured, how it's maintained, what are the retention policies, what is it used for, how do we ensure standardization and consistency, all of those things that are really critical for an organization to clearly run, and also have ownership and accountability of the data that the organization has, right? They have a responsibility to all of those stakeholders. So that's becoming much more prevalent. There are some industries that are much more regulated, and this is already in place, but this is becoming more of the norm for all organizations as they anticipate needing to use more technologies and really relying on the data that they have in order to do so. So certainly putting something formalized in place is critical, but also communicating it to those audiences and being transparent about the intention and all of the safeguards that are in place. So you can really build up the trust as these solutions are implemented and evolve over time.
Hey, thanks, Leilani. So a really strong message from you in terms of the data, the governance of it, and, you know, really the ownership. And so, you know, kind of just in contrast, or maybe building on that, Mel, what do you think that your clients might do differently in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I think our clients are very focused, or have been very focused, on the diversity part of D&I, the measurement, exactly as Leilani's been talking about, and ensuring that we identify bias that's being built into processes up front. But for me, D&I is all about the inclusion bit. It's how do you create a truly inclusive organization? And so AI enables you not only to measure the level of bias and identify where bias is being built in, but it also enables you access to a much wider population of people that might be interested, for example, in applying for a job, applying for a promotion, wanting to get involved in certain things in the organization. And AI can be used as a tool to go out and gain access to those people. I think we also need to consider the design and sign-off process of all the underlying processes, so that once there are clients who still worry that bias is being built into the AI algorithms and so on that we use. So making sure that those underlying processes are built with diversity of thought in them in the first place, using inclusive teams to assess and test those algorithms, and then being able to make sure that bias isn't built in. That will all come from a truly inclusive organisation in the first place.
Absolutely, and actually there's been a lot of things kind of reported where people are really, and organizations are really trying to use diverse teams and having that, you know, inclusive element when they're actually building the algorithm. So, you know, you make a fantastic point there, Mel. Excellent. And I think it would be great to get Devyani involved in the conversation. Devyani, obviously you're in the space, you're working this sector day in, day out. So I think it'll be really interesting for people at home if perhaps you could share some of the solutions that you've been seeing around D&I.
Right. So I guess because of the hub that we run, we do work with a lot of clients, and the whole idea is to help them engage and experiment and use AI solutions. Now, currently, I see the focus being much more on the recruitment and the talent acquisition place. And I think there's a far greater level of understanding and acceptance about solutions, whether it's really removing bias in the way the job advert is written, solutions to help candidate attraction and therefore make sure that you're able to attract a more diverse group of candidates, a CV screening, and again there, the solutions kind of automatically make sure that some of the biases that happen when individuals do the screening is eliminated, but also the interviewing process. I think Leilani referred to clearly data and reward data. And again, we've seen whether it's gender pay reporting, but also because reward traditionally has a lot of data, there's a good use of AI solutions that sit on top, and then that can help around pattern, but also a few other areas. But I think the next 6 to 18 months are going to be quite exciting, actually. Because firstly, most organizations now are looking at, I think the positive term is agile workforce planning, but we all know that there is going to be restructuring, downsizing. And it's really important that this is done in a fair manner. I think Mel referred to the fact that you need to give people access. And I think what AI solutions do is, it's not a top-down approach, but there is a level of people being able to engage and apply for roles and see where they could get matched and look at the kind of skills that are needed. But also any fair reward decisions during the process, you can have AI solutions helping you around that. I think the second is clearly talent acquisition is going to see a greater use, particularly as a lot of workforces become more either remote or distributed. It will rely much more on the use of AI tools and solutions. I think D&I training, while there's a dip right now, will again see, but the focus will be not on the traditional classroom training or expensive training. And again, AI solutions can help. And particularly, I think there's a whole range available. We've seen solutions right from using a WhatsApp-based, machine learning-based, which is really more for your, distributed workforce, which is blue collar, right up to virtual reality solutions, which really is more for leadership roles. But that can help you really coach and engage your managers in a very different way. I mean, sexual harassment, I think we've always had systems for this, but for example, blockchain is being used now to help employees. And again, I think in a remote working environment, some of these solutions are going to see more of an uptake. I mentioned coaching, but it's going to become more challenging for team leaders to manage their teams, and particularly in a diverse and a remote team. And we are definitely seeing an increase in interest in improving manager capability around this area. And finally, leadership assessment. I think, again, I referred to earlier that what leaders need to look like could change. And of course, you still have the traditional assessment forms. But I think Mel referred to the fact that digital tools are now being used for collaboration in a big way. And the increased use of digital tools means actually there's a whole lot of data available. And what organizations are looking at is to use organization network analysis, which is really means you don't have to be intrusive. You look at the data that's available either via email, chat, collaboration tools, Zoom calls, but via that, it becomes easier then to figure out who are the influencers, who are the leaders, and your traditional talent pipeline can then be amended, but it's based on real data. It's not based on a hypothetical assessment of someone. So this is just a flavor, but in terms of technologies, clearly you're going to see more of chatbot use, which is the basic form of machine learning. You are going to see more of gamification because I think the way it engages people is very different. Virtual reality, I think I have mentioned the use of virtual reality and the use of organization network analysis. So I think a whole range of options. These are not as esoteric as it sounds. They're very cost effective. And I think the usage of these will be far wider than it has been in the past.
Thanks, Devyani. Look, you've covered a lot of areas here and also a lot of different solutions. So I guess that if somebody does want to know more about this, they should feel free to contact you directly.
Yeah.
But I guess what we're hearing right now is from yourself, Leilani, Mel, there are a number of options that HR leaders and business leaders who are listening right now could actually go back and try with their teams. But obviously, we all know that there's an increased pressure on costs. And so it would be great if the panel could share some ideas or tips on how to build a business case specifically for these types of initiatives. Just love to get your thoughts on this, Leilani. What do you think?
So I think the approach that you would take is similar to any technology implementation, and that's really to find a use case, find a problem you're trying to solve in the organization and really determine, do you have the data you need? Do you have the right requirements elicited? Do you have a project that could be designed? Do you have outcomes that could be, clarified and shared? And you use that to move forward towards selecting the technology. And it needs to happen in that order because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of advertising about all these great tools that exist. And a lot of times the company comes with, we want to use this technology, how do we use it? And then you back into the problem. And that becomes a very difficult way to build a business case. So I implore companies to really look for actual problem that exists in their organization, be very clear about their intention on how to really move that project forward, and then look at the technology that could support that, whether it's a make or buy decision.
Definitely some sage advice from you there, Leilani. So start with the problem and work forward. Some good points. And Mel, any kind of tips from you that people can take on board?
Yeah, just a couple of things. D&I is now typically a core part of any organization's business strategy, and it is, I think, is growing in importance. I know we've talked about downsizing to some extent, but there are proven statistics around how D&I improves revenue, client revenue, and profitability, compliance to risk, and so on. So I don't see necessarily an aligned reduction in the D&I agenda. So bigger organizations have invested in diversity teams. They typically have a head of diversity, or at the very least having a responsible person in the organization for the D&I agenda. So that's kind of in place. I think linking any D&I business case to the overall business strategy and objectives of the organization, and demonstrating how any initiative, as we would for any HR activity or investment requirement, and how that proposed initiative can support the success of the organization in its widest sense. So trying to promote D&I just because it's the right thing to do doesn't always get an important business case over the line, but where you can demonstrate increased profit, decreased cost, increased efficiency, better customer experience, if you can link it to those sort of strategic objectives, then you'll have much better chance of getting it over that investment line.
Excellent, Mel, and a really nice build on actually what Leilani was saying. So look at the case, link it to the objectives, and demonstrate the returns you're going to get. So no, some really good advice there. And Devyani, what I guess the question is, how can HR leaders get familiar or more familiar with some of these solutions? Are you able to expand on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, as an ex-HR leader myself and having managed HR teams, I know that all this can sound quite unfamiliar, but quite scary actually. And I think a lot of us have been quite risk averse, not very technology orientated. But also I think there is, a lack of understanding of what this all means. How is AI different? What is available out there? And the hub that we run is really to help HR do that. And going back to, I think, Leilani's point, we start with what's the issue rather than years of fancy glitzy tech. We are not techies. But yeah, I think the first step is really to have a safe environment to try something out. And actually, as part of the hub, we are also currently offering a workshop in case it's of interest. Let me just share the workshop details with you. So it's really a free complimentary workshop. Sorry, as you can see.
That's it.
Not been as slick on this as I should be, but yeah, I think so. It's really to help HR teams to experiment, and it allows HR teams to really, we focus on one or two areas. It could be D&I, but it could be anything else in the employee life cycle. Come together for a collective brainstorm. We try and showcase a couple of solutions, which helps it make much more real life. And it just increases their understanding, I think, because the first step is to really increase your understanding rather than to jump into anything. And as I said, this is across any part of the employee life cycle. I think each and every one of these issues continue to be important, but of course it depends on which industry you're in, what organization you're in, and different organizations can have a different focus at every point of time then.
Great. Thank you, Devyani. I think we'll just take a pause there. We've had quite a few questions come in, and actually Tim has asked them through the chat. So I'll just try and field a couple of these, being focused on the time we have. So Leilani, I can see there's one there for you. It says, what solutions are you seeing working with firms' data, like Workday, etc.? So any comments on there for Tim?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of AI solutions. I'll be honest, I'm not really going to share my particular, because I think it's really based on the needs of the organization, and you have to go through a lot of information security checks and all kind of fun things that your organization will require you to do. But yes, there are tools that layer over the Workdays, SuccessFactors, the Oracles, etc. And what they do is they kind of parse the data that is available from those solutions. It's very similar to the same approach that a testing software would be that's embedded on top of those solutions, or a digital adoption tool, right, that is embedded in these type of solutions to provide guidance during transactions. So it's the same methodology where the AI is kind of going in there, observing the data using natural language processing and trying to find patterns in the data that is available. There are secure ways of doing so, and your respective IT teams will ensure of that, but there are AI solutions that just layer over, and much more so to come.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Leilani. And thank you from Tim as well.
Just slightly to add to that, don't be scared of those applications, because they're not necessarily reinvesting the whole value of your HCM system. This may be a very light layer on the top which you could do proof of concept with.
Excellent, thank you, Mel. And I think thank you from Tim as well to both of you. Another question, what is the example of where blockchain is being used? So I don't know, Devyani or Mel, any kind of comments on that?
Okay, so let me start with a few areas, and clearly some of them have more of a D&I lens and the others probably less so. But referencing, employee referencing is an area where blockchain is being used now quite a bit. And that can be very helpful, particularly if you now think of the gig economy is going to be a big part of the workforce. So you have people who need to move from organization to organization. And what blockchain does is once you get the referencing, you can carry, it's like a passport that you can carry with you anywhere. But learning and training solutions, there are a few that use blockchain. I mentioned sexual harassment or just reporting of sexual harassment cases. There's a great blockchain solution that uses that. And apart from that, I think the other use of blockchain right now is really, again, in the pay and reward area. Of course, the application is primarily, again, temporary contract gig workers. And it helps in different ways, but the biggest advantage to the worker is, particularly I think in an era right now where you're going to have people working less hours, a few number of days, it's not your standard full-time employment, it can help payment immediately as soon as they finish work and not have to wait till the end of the month. So I think blockchain clearly, given its popularity in the fintech world, there, HR is clearly behind, but there are these few areas we've already seen the application of blockchain.
Great, thank you, Devyani. And one last question, just if there's some brief insights. I don't know if Mel, maybe you can think about this, or even Leilani. Any tips to convince employees who may not feel comfortable using a tech solution? Do you ever come across that with clients, or any advice there?
I get that all the time, and I think having originally come from an IT background, even more so. I think that what we talked a little bit earlier about addressing these from what is the business problem and how is AI and the digital solution going to solve that problem for them, rather than saying you really should be using more AI or should be using more digital. It's saying, what is the thing that you want to do? How can we make that easier using a digital solution? You talk about it in that order.
Sure, great.
I agree. I think these are key stakeholders and they need to be part of the decision-making process. We need to understand what their needs are. And again, we have to position it as ways to enhance and optimize what they can offer to the organization. And so getting their requirements and understanding how they want to work with the technology is a key part of the change management process.
Great, thank you, Leilani. Some excellent advice there. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap up now, but not without giving some of the key takeaways from our panelists. So Devyani will hopefully be able to share these with me, but I'll make a start. So first of all, one of the key takeaways is that AI is evolving fast. So as Leilani's mentioned, focus on something that's relevant for the organization and don't be distracted by the noise. So good point there. Secondly, have the right governance in place regarding data and technology before you start your AI journey. Thirdly, really understand and clearly articulate the benefit and the cost of using AI, especially around D&I. And really think about the inclusion element. So how can AI improve the overall culture of inclusivity rather than just the diversity stat? So a good point there by Mel. And lastly, we see a lot of success when organizations start small, deliver some early incremental success, potentially with a pilot, and then go on with a larger rollout. So just some good key tips and takeaways for those listening at home to take away. But I'm going to close the webinar now because we've come to the end of our time. But thank you very much to Leilani, to Mel, and to Devyani. And thank you to you all at home for joining us. We'd love to you to join us again on the 17th, where we talk about team effectiveness through the use of AI. But until then, have a good weekend, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.